We continue now at the top of Daf Chesam at Beis Meseches Makkos. This is Makkos Daf 8b. On the previous summit, the Gemara asked, how does the Mishnah know that when the pasuk says Vasher Yavo Esreyehu Bayar, that if a person goes into a forest to chop wood and then he kills someone by mistake, how does the Mishnah know that that was something that was being done voluntarily, that it was not a mitzvah? And on the previous summit, the Gemara suggested that it's learned from the word Asher. The word Asher indicates a reshus. But the Gemara asked on that, if that is the case, what about when the pasuk is talking about someone who's tamei, who's matame the mikdash, and he gets kares? So there also the pasuk uses the word asher, and there it's not necessarily voluntary. It could very well be a mitzvah, like for example the person is tamei because of a mace mitzvah. And so the Gemara says it's different over there by the case of tumah, because over there the pasuk says tamei, it says he is tamei, and we understand that to mean mikol makom. We understand that to mean in any situation that he becomes tamei. Again, in all of those kinds of situations, even if it involved a mitzvah, still of course if he's matame the mikdash, we're going to say there's going to be the punishment of kares. But the Gemara continues, Ahumi boile l'chidatanya, but the words tamei, that's needed for a different thing. It's needed for what's taught in the Brisa. Tamei l'rabos tvul yom. Tamei includes even a tvul yom. That's somebody who was tamei and he immersed that day, but he didn't wait for the end of the day. He's not totally pure. And tumaso bo, when it says in the pasuk tumaso bo l'rabos mechusar kippurim, that includes the mechusar kippurim. That's also someone who's tamei and went through some of the purification process, but did not bring the final atonement, the final carbon. And Rashi explains, L'rabos tvul yom shem nichnas l'mikdash anush kares. If a tvul yom enters the mikdash, he gets kares. And l'rabos mechusar kippurim, to include a mechusar kippurim, eos and tumas hatzrichos carbon. There are various kinds of tumas that require a carbon. V'tavel v'hariv shimsho v'lo hevi kaparasu. You might have somebody who immersed and the sun sets, but he didn't yet bring his atonement. V'nichnas l'mikdash, and he enters the Beis HaMikdash, so chayiv. So he's chayiv in those situations. V'arba tumas, saying there are four kinds of tumas that require some kind of kapara, some kind of carbon. Hatunas carbon, they require carbon, and those four are hazava, v'hayoledes, v'hamitzora, the zav, zava, and the yoledes and the mitzora. So in any case, that's what tamei is for. You can't say that tamei is to include even a mitzvah. And the Gemara continues and says, Amar Lei said to him, Ano may od kwamina. I was saying that it's really learned from the word od. That word is still extra, and again, that teaches even in a situation of mitzvah. And the Gemara continues, Ika damasni lo aha, there are those who learn the above discussion on the following. And Rashi explains, Ika damasni lo lahada, amar le'ahume rabbanon l'Rava. Above we had one of the rabbanon saying to Rava something, v'hada osvei Ravina, and then Ravina asked a question. So they learn it aha, they learn it on this, on the following. The pasuk says, B'charish uv'katzer tishbo, so you're going to rest from plowing and harvesting. The full pasuk is, Sheishes yamim tavot, 6 days you will work, uvayom hashvi tishbos, on the 7th day you will rest. B'charish uv'katzer tishbos, from plowing and from harvesting you will rest. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Kiva says, Eino tzarech lomar charish shel shvius v'katzer shel shvius. It doesn't need to say the plowing of the Shemitah year and the harvesting of the Shemitah year. Sharei kvar nemar, because it already says, Sadcha lo sizra, it already says you can't plant your field. V'charmecha lo sizmar, you can't prune your vineyard. Ela afilu charish shel erev shvius shenichnas l'shvius, even the plowing the year before shvius that will enter into the Shemitah year. V'katzer shel shvius shiyatza l'matzai shvius, and the harvest of the Shemitah year that exits into the year after Shvius, that is what we are referring to. And Rashi explains, Ein tzarech lomar charish v'katzer shel shvius, di'al karchach b'shvius d'shmita hakasem medaver. The first thing that Rashi tells us is you have to say that this pasuk, even though the pasuk sounds like it's talking about Shabbos, but it's really talking about the Shemitah year. De'ikid echsiv, because if it's as written, da'ayom hashvi kai, that it's going on the seventh day, meaning on Shabbos, ma'ishna charish v'katzer d'nakat, why are you specifically talking about plowing and harvesting? Rather, what it means to say is as follows: 6 days you work, and the 7th day you rest. And the 6 days which you work, so you're going to stop, or you're going to rest rather, from plowing and harvesting, again, talking about the Shemitah year. And again, Rabbi Kiva says it doesn't need to actually be talking about the Shemitah year, so rather there are certain things you can't do even the year before the Shemitah year, and certain things even after. Rashi explains, Hanichnas l'shvius, meaning shalo yachrosh b'shishis, you should not plow in the 6th year, charisha ha-moelis l'shvius, if it's a plowing that's going to be beneficial for the 7th year. Because shel shvius hayotze l'matzoi shvius, and also the harvest of the 7th that goes to the year after the 7th, meaning shimhei via shlish b'shvius. Let's say it grows 1/3 in the Shemitah year, me'ozi ru'uya likatzer, at that point in time it is fit to be harvested. V'im katzer b'shminis, and if you would then harvest in the 8th year, tzarech linhog ba kedushas shvius, you have to to deal with it with the Kedusha Shvius, with the holiness of produce of the Shemitah year. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yishmael says, Machorish Rishus, Af Kodzi Rishus. Just like plowing is a Rishus, it's something that is voluntary, so too the harvesting that we're talking about is something that is a Rishus, meaning it's not a mitzvah. And the point is, according to Rabbi Yishmael, Yotza Ketzir HaOmer Shu Mitzvah. This comes to exclude the harvesting of the Omer, which is a mitzvah. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Yishmael Omer Machorish Rishus, Uve Shabbos Koy. Rabbi Yishmael is saying that you should interpret the pasuk that it's talking about Shabbos, not the Shemitah year. Ulahachi Nakat Chorish V'Kotzer. And the reason why we specifically talk about plowing and harvesting, Lomar Lach, is to say to you, Maha Chorish Ani Yoser Lach B'Shabbos Chorish Shel Rishusu. Just like the plowing that's forbidden on Shabbos is something that's not a mitzvah, She'ein Lanu Chorish Shel Mitzvah. There is no example of plowing for a mitzvah. Af Kotzer Eini Oser Lach Elo Shel Rishus Yotza Ketzir HaOmer. So too, the only kind of harvesting that's Osir on Shabbos is if it's not a mitzvah. That excludes harvesting for the Karban Omer, which is a mitzvah that would not be prohibited on Shabbos. And so therefore, on this machlokas tanoim between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael, Amar le'ahume Rabbanan l'Rava, one of the Rabbanan said to Rava, Mimai decharisha derishos. How do you know we're talking about plowing that's not a mitzvah? Dilma charishas omer de mitzvah. Maybe it's the plowing for the omer, which is a mitzvah. Ve'afilu hachi amar achman tishbos, and still the Torah is saying you have to rest. You can't do that on Shabbos. Amar le'i said to him, Kevon de matzah choresh eino choresh. Since if it would be found that it was plowed, you don't have to plow. Lav mitzvah. There's no specific mitzvah to actually plow. That's again just in order, it's a hechsher of the mitzvah. It's in order to eventually do the mitzvah, but it's not fundamentally a mitzvah. If it would be already plowed, then there would be no need to plow at all. And Rashi explains, if you find that it's plowed, you don't need to plow, aval kotzer, but when it comes to harvesting, afilu matzah kotzer, mitzvah liksor. Even if you find that it was harvested already, it is a mitzvah liksor lishma. It's a mitzvah to harvest it specifically for the mitzvah of the Omer. Because it's written, uksartem v'avesem es Omer. Again, it says that you should harvest. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Ravina l'Rava. Ravina asked Rava the following question from our Mishnah. Yatzav ha'makes benova, Rava rodes talmido, shleach bezdin. Again, if a father is striking his son, a Rebbe is striking his Talmud, an agent of bezdin is giving malchus, so in those cases, the person doesn't go to Golas if he mistakenly kills the person. Why don't we say as follows? Kevan di ilu gomer lav mitzvah, since if the son will learn properly, there's no mitzvah to strike him. Hashtanami la mitzvah, so we should say it's not fundamentally, it's not considered to be a mitzvah. And the Gemara continues and answers, Hasam over there, when it comes to the case of our Mishnah, Afagav de Gomer Nami mitzvah kavod, even though the son has already learned, it is still a mitzvah to strike the son, to give musar essentially to the son. T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, Yaser bin chavianichecha. Again, it is a good thing, a positive thing, to give musar to the son. But the Gemara continues, Hadar Amar Rava, but then Rava said, Lav milsi di amri, what I said is not actually true. Rashi explains, Lav milsi di amri shoya li lo hashivo teshuva nitzachas tikra lav mitzvah. I have a better answer, that the pasuk is not talking about a mitzvah, and the reason is as follows: Ketzira dumya decharisha. The harvesting is similar to the plowing. Macharisha matzah choresh eino choresh. Just like when it comes to plowing, if it's already plowed, you don't need to plow. Af ketzira nami. So too, when it comes to harvesting, visal gadaitach mitzvah. And if you think it's a mitzvah, matzah kotzer eino kotzer. You think that if it's found harvested, you don't have to harvest. Mitzvah liktzor al havi. It actually is a mitzvah to harvest and to bring. And Rashi explains, my time, what's the reason? Kotzer dumya dechoresh. Harvesting similar to plowing, machorish b'chol makom, just like plowing all the time. Matzah chorish ain't mitzvah lachrosh. If it's already plowed, there's no mitzvah at all to plow. Af kotzer, so too by harvesting, b'hachi askino, and that's what we're talking about in the pasuk. Shematzah kotzer ain't mitzvah liktzor, that if it's found to be harvested, there's no mitzvah to do it. Yatza katzira omer, to exclude the harvesting of the omer. Shafilu matzah kotzer mitzvah liktzor. There, even if you found that it was already harvested, there's a specific mitzvah to do the harvesting. And finally, Rashi says, Visal kadaitach mitzvah. If you think it's a mitzvah, bekotzer shel mitzvah, by a harvesting of a mitzvah, matzah kotzer eino kotzer. Do you think if you found it harvested already, you wouldn't have to harvest it? To me, this is a wonderment. Of course you have to harvest if it is a mitzvah. And so again, the point over here is that Rava is saying, we understand that we're talking about rishus, because by charisha, if you find it charish, you don't have to plow. If it's already plowed, you don't have to plow. And so too, that must be what we're talking about when it comes to ketzira. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Ha'av gola al yedei haben, the father can go to exile through the son, V'haben gola al yedei ha'av, and the son, he can be exiled through the father. And Rashi explains, al yedei haben, what does it mean the father is exiled through the son? Im hargo livno, meaning if he kills his son b'shogeg by mistake, he can go to exile, and the same with the son, he can be exiled through the father. Hakol golan al yedei Yisrael, everyone can be exiled through killing a Yisrael, V'Yisrael golan al yedeihen, and a Yisrael can be gola through them, chutz miger toshav, with the exception of a ger toshav. We'll see Rashi in a moment. The ger toshav ain't no gola el al yedei ger toshav, and a ger toshav only goes to exile through a ger toshav. And Rashi explains chutz mi ger toshav, except a ger toshav means she'ein Yisrael gola al yado, meaning a Yisrael is not going to be gola, is not going to be exiled through a ger toshav. And hakol golan, it says everybody is exiled. Mefarish begemar leisuyamai. The Gemara will explain what that hakol, what it is coming to include. And the Gemara says, "Av gola al yedei haben." It says the father is exiled through the son. Didn't you just say above that the father is excluded when he strikes his son, because we're talking about a situation where it's a mitzvah? And the Gemara says the Gemara says that we're talking about a son who has already learned, and therefore there's no mitzvah to strike him. But the Gemara says, the gomer mitzvah. But you just said above that even though he learned, there's still a mitzvah. The gomer mitzvah covered. Even though he learned, there's still the person is doing a mitzvah. And so the Gemara instead says b'shulya denagri. We're talking in teaching him a profession. Rashi explains b'shulya denagri b'limud choresh eitzim, in terms of the carpentry of wood. She'eno malam the Torah. The point over here is that he's not teaching him Torah. Elo umnis. He's teaching him some kind of a profession. The Gemara says shulya denagri chiyusi delamde. When he's teaching him shulya denagri, so he's teaching him a livelihood. And Rashi explains chiyusi hu v'af zum mitzvah alav lelamde. This is also a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to teach a livelihood. At the alfinan lam mikra b'perakama de kiddushin. We learned that out from Sukkim in the first parak of kiddushin. And so the Gemara then says the gomer nasach risi. The case over here is that he already had learned a different profession. This is a second profession that is not a mitzvah. So in the course of that teaching, that's not a mitzvah. That's a situation where the father can be exiled through the son. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "V'haben gola al yedei ha'av." Again, the son can be exiled through the father. The Gemara says, "Uramini." We have the following contradiction. The pasuk says, "Makei nefesh." It says, "One who strikes a soul." Prat l'makei aviv. That comes to exclude somebody who strikes his father. The full pasuk over here is "L'fnei Yisrael v'lager v'latosha v'zochim tiana sheish ha'orim ha'ela l'miklat." Talks about the 6 arei miklat. Lanus shama kol makei nefesh b'shgaga. It says anybody who's makei nefesh b'shgaga will flee over there, and we understand from that's prat l'makei aviv, that it comes to exclude somebody who strikes his father. And Rashi explains, makei nefesh gabe horeg b'shgaga ksiv lanas shama makei nefesh b'shgaga. Again, this is written by someone who kills by mistake. Prat l'makei aviv shelo chayev golus. If somebody strikes his father, he's not chayev golus. Elo l'misha hakaso tuluya b'nefesh she'eno chayev olav ela im kein hargo. It means that it has to be someone that if you strike him, you're only chayev if you kill the person. Yotza makei aviv. So the Bryce is saying it excludes someone who strikes his father. Shu chayev olav misa b'chabur b'alma. When a person wounds his father, even wounding the father is enough to be chayev misa. Because and right now we think that we're excluding the son from Golus even if he kills his father. And so the Gemara continues and answers. Amar Rav Kahana says, Lokash, it's not difficult. Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. One follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, and the other follows the opinion of the Rabbanan, as the Gemara now explains. Rabbi Shimon do'amar chenek chomer misayef. According to Rabbi Shimon, who says that strangulation, the death penalty of chenek, is stricter than the death penalty of sayif, of beheading by the sword. So shigagas sayif nitna lechapara. So what we'll say is as follows: if somebody does a mistake in an aveira involving a punishment of sayif, so there's a kapara, there's an atonement. But shigagas chenek lo nitna lekapara. But when it comes to a mistake in an aveira where the punishment is chenek, so there we're going to say, since chenek is stricter, that's not given over for a kapara, for an atonement. And the Rabbanan diamri, but according to the Rabbanan who say sayif chomer michenek, that sayif is stricter than chenek, so horeg aviv b'shogeg, somebody who kills his father by mistake, shigagas sayif, that's a shigagas sayif, which again is stricter according to the Rabbanan. V'shigagas sayif nitna lekapara, and shigagas sayif will be given over for kapara. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Shimon da'amar, according to Rabbi Shimon who says, B'sanhedrin b'perak daled misos chenek chomer misayif. Again, Rabbi Shimon says strangulation is stricter than sayif. Uledidei, so according to Rabbi Shimon, ha'horeg es aviv b'chenek, somebody who kills his father, the punishment is chenek, it's strangulation, that's the stricter. The tanan mishen es chayev beis misos bezin nidon b'chamur, because the rule is, if you're chayev 2 death penalties, you always get the stricter one. V'horeg aviv, someone who kills his father, chayev shtei misos, there's 2 possible death penalties. Sha'osa chabura b'yaviv minan echnok, and somebody who wounds his father gets chenek. V'hamake nefesh, and somebody who strikes a soul in general, kills somebody, min ha'nerag, and he's going to be beheaded by the sword. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's going to be chenek, which is more strict. V'kan yesh chaburas aviv ritzicha. Here you have a wound and you have murder. Well, Rabbi Shimon damer chenek chamer. So according to Rabbi Shimon, who says chenek is stricter, im haya zem mezid haya bechenek. If he did this on purpose, he would get strangulation. V'achshav shu shogeg, and now that he's doing it by mistake, let's say killing his father by mistake, lo nitna shigagaso lechapara begala. So that kind of shkaga, that kind of mistake, he's not going to get the atonement of exile. Im nitna Torah kapara lo shigagasayef shehikala. Just because the Torah says that by shigagasayef, meaning killing in general, if a person kills someone in general, it's sayef, and if you do it by mistake, you go to golus. But that's shigagasayef. That's a lower kind of avera. Lo nitna kapara lo shigas chenek. That's not true when it comes to shigas chenek. That's why Rabbi Shimon would say when it comes to one's father, that's going to be a shigas chenek, and that's going to be excluded. There's going to be no golus. But according to the Rabbanan, the Armi Saif Chamer Mechenek, that they say Saif is stricter. So Horegav, if Shigas Saif, if a person kills his father, you're going to get Saif because that's the punishment for killing someone in general, and Saif is stricter. Shaharei Ilu Mezid Hoya Nidar Mechamura, because again, if you did it on purpose, you get the stricter one. Shehi Saif, which is beheading by the sword. Veshigas Saif Nitna Lechapara Begolas, and again, a Shigas Saif, there you can get the atonement of Golas. Essentially, what the Gemara is saying is that according to the Rabbanan, if a person kills his father, he gets the punishment of killing a regular person. That's the punishment that you get. And of course, killing a regular person, you do that by mistake, you go to Golus. And so the same thing is going to be true according to the Rabbanan when one kills his father by mistake. And the Gemara continues, Rava Amar, Rava says a completely different explanation of the Brisa. Prat la'osa chabura ba'aviv b'shogeg. What the Brisa just means is that if a person makes a wound in his father b'shogeg, maybe you would think you go to Golus. That's all the Brisa is excluding. Not killing the father b'shogeg. There you certainly do go to Golus. I might think, since if you wound your father b'mezid, so you get the death penalty, so if you do by mistake, maybe you should get Golus. Kamash Malon, that's what the Brisa is teaching, that is not the case. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The Mishnah said, Hakol Golan al Yedei Yisrael. Everyone is exiled through a Jew, meaning Hakol, and the Gemara says, Hakol Golan al Yedei Yisrael le'suye mai. When it says everyone is exiled through a Yisrael, what is that coming to include? And the Gemara says, La'suye Eved v'kusi. It's coming to include an Eved and a Kusi. And the Gemara continues and explains, Tanina lahad d'tan Rabban. And our Mishnah is saying the same thing as the following Brisa. Eved v'kusi gola v'loka al Yedei Yisrael. An Eved and a Kusi, they can go to Golus, they can get Malchus through a Yisrael, exactly what we're saying over here. Hakol Golan al Yedei Yisrael includes an Eved and Kusi. Let's say the Eved and the Kusi, they kill a Yisrael by mistake, they'll go to exile. The Yisrael Gola v'loka al Yedei Kusi v'Eved. And a Yisrael can also go to exile and get Malchus through a Kusi and an Eved. And the Gemara continues and explains, Bishlama Eved v'Kusi Gola al Yedei Yisrael v'loka. I understand that an Eved and a Kusi, they can go to Golas through a Yisrael and they can get Malchus. Gola dekatle, the case would be as follows. They would go to exile, let's say for example, they kill the Yisrael by mistake. Veloka delatye, and they get Malchus. Let's say they curse the Yisrael. That would be a situation of Malchus. El Yisrael gola veloka al yedei kusi, but a Yisrael is going to be exiled and get Malchus through a kusi. Bishlama gola dekatle. I understand the case of Gola. Again, he kills him by mistake. El aloka amai, but if he curses him, but lashes, why would that be the case? Delatye, you're going to say it's because he cursed him. V'nasi bi'amcha lo sar, ba'osa ma'isa amcha. It says you shouldn't curse a nasi, and we understand that to mean it has to be somebody who's osa ma'isa amcha, someone who's doing the deeds of your nation. And that's not true by a kusi. If a person would curse a kusi who's not osa ma'isa amcha, so there shouldn't be malchus. So what exactly does that mean? And Rashi explains, Loka delatye, again, the case of Malchus is if he curses him, ve'aminan b'shvuas hamakalas chavero. We say in shvuas, if somebody curses his friend over below say there's a transgression of a negative commandment, ve'asya b'ma'atzar me'hamakal dayan v'nasi v'chorsh. It's learned out from these various cases of makalal, cursing a judge, cursing a nasi, and cursing a cherish. And in any case, again, the Gemara is asking, that should not apply when one curses a kusi. He's not somebody who is doing the deeds of the nation of Klal Yisrael. And so the Gemara continues and says, Elamar Avacha Bar Yaakov, rather Avacha Bar Yaakov says, Kagon, for example, the case could be, Shehayid Bo V'huzam, the case could be that he testifies about him, and then he becomes an Edom Zomi, he's part of a case of Edom Zomim. Rashi says, Shehayid Bo Shu Chayim Malchus, he testifies about him that he is Chayim Malchus, and that would be exactly this kind of a case. For example, the Yisrael testifies about the Kusi that he's Chayim Malchus, and so then we're going to say, if he's an Ed Zomim, he's going to get Malchus. But the Gemara continues and asks, but are you going to say the same thing by Eved? Because again, we said an Eved also can get Malkus through a Yisrael. Shehayed bo v'huzim, you're going to say that the Eved testified and became an Eid Zomim. Eved bar Eidusu, is an Eved even able to testify? An Eved can't be an Eid. An Eved is not able to be a witness. Elamar Ravacha Breder Avika, rather Ravacha Breder Avika says, Hachav Mayaskin, on here, what are we talking about? Kagon Sheiko Hakah, that he struck him in a fashion, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tes Amud Aleph.